Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is novelist Daniel Silva. Daniel, can I call you Dan? What do you go by?
My name is Daniel, but my dear friends actually call me Danny. I wouldn't do that.
No, I don't think that would be like crossing a line.
I think so. It's okay. You can cross that line if you want to.
So tell us about your series of thrillers. For people who aren't familiar with them, just set the scene for us, please.
They feature a very interesting protagonist named Gabriel Allon. He has appeared in 12 books, which is interesting in that he was only supposed to appear in one book, but more on that later. He is a sometimes Israeli intelligence officer and assassin who has a very interesting cover job. He's one of the world's finest art restorers. And all of the books contain a very strong art component. They are definitely a combination between art and international intrigue and intelligence and present-day issues. And I think that's what has made them so successful, that and I'm told over and over again by people that I read your books, but I don't read any other books about the espionage or even thrillers, and I think that's all because of the art component.
And how did that come about? Are these two interests of yours?
They're two interests of mine, definitely, but they came about because of the character, and the character, the unique combination that I created when I created this gentleman named Gabriel Allon, who was not supposed to be a continuing character. I'm going to reiterate that. All of a sudden I just realized at the end of that first book that I had created something special. I had doubts about whether an Israeli character could really be a true mass market character. I was convinced that could be the case, and I wrote a second and a third, and here he is 12 books later. But I didn't set out necessarily to create a series that combined art and intelligence. It just happened organically.
When you because you didn't intend this to be a series,
right?
Were there decisions that you made in the first book that you wish you could go back now and part of his backstory?
No, I don't think I would have. The only thing is that he's of middle age, we'll call it. I don't even know exactly how old Gabriel Allon is. In the first book, he was age appropriate for that story. And one of the things that I wanted to be part of his backstory was that he was part of the intelligence team that hunted down and assassinated the perpetrators of the Munich Olympics massacre. And so he had to be old enough to be able to have done that. And I would never forsake that component of his backstory to take a few years off him. So the only thing is that I've let him age with the series. The series sort of progresses along in sync with the time. The book, The Fallen Angel, takes place roughly in 2012, and so I have a character who is not a Superman. He is in his 50s. And it's kind of fun writing about someone in their 50s.
And I think one of the interesting things about the book is that Gabriel's story progresses both personally, and his job with Israeli intelligence changes.
Without question. And that sort of started mid-series where I really brought forward more elements of his personal life. I allowed him to marry again.
Right.
And so that his relationship with his wife, his relationship with his previous wife, his relationships with all his core friends from the old days, has really sort of risen to prominence as the series has progressed. And now Gabriel's journey in life is really a very important aspect to the books.
Well, the newest one, the art involved is a Caravaggio painting that he is restoring, and it's another one
for the Vatican, which is a story in itself.
Right. And it's not Gabriel's. I mean, there are many things that I found fascinating about this, but one of them in one of the earlier books is when Gabriel does some work for the Vatican and is involved in a plot. And
Well, he first encountered the Vatican in 2003 in a book called The Confessor. And in that book were two characters that I fell in love with. One was a gentleman named Monsignor Luigi Donati, private secretary to His Holiness Pope Paul VII, and the second was the Pope himself. And Gabriel's life and career have intersected with the Vatican at numerous points. I think that The Messenger is what was one of my most popular books, and in that book there was a terrorist attack at the Vatican. But there have been little visits to the Vatican and little meetings with these two gentlemen throughout the series. But I wanted to do something different in this book. I wanted Gabriel to actually go to work each day at the Vatican. I couldn't resist the paradox of this Israeli super agent, Jewish boy born in the Valley of Jezreel, going to St. Anne's Gate every morning and going to work in the Vatican restoration labs. And so that's why I had him restore this Caravaggio masterpiece, a masterpiece that could never actually leave Vatican soil. And I couldn't resist the opportunity to write that scene.
well, I know that in your books you thank a friend of yours who is an art restorer who advises, I presume. But how was that a field that you were interested in studying, or?
No, not at all. It was the creation of Gabriel Allon was part of the long process of character development, but it's also rather serendipitous and maybe a bit lucky as well. I was working on his character sketch when I was working on that first book, and I was walking down the street in Georgetown with my wife one day, and she said, don't forget we have dinner with David Bull tonight. I stopped in my tracks and I said, I've got it. Now David Bull he's a dear friend of mine, but he's truly one of the world's finest art restorers. And I knew at that second that what I wanted to do with Gabriel Allon. So I went to dinner at David's house that night and I pulled him aside. I said, listen, I have a crazy idea. I want to turn an Israeli assassin into an Italian art restorer. Can you help me? He said, of course I can. And the next day I went to the restoration labs in the National Gallery of Art in Washington. I walk through these doors and I see, a Monet on one easel and a Titian on another easel, and I see these restorers with their magnifying visors on, working like this, repairing them, healing them. And I said, that's it. And Gabriel Allon is an art restorer. And so it happened quite naturally. I knew virtually nothing about the craft of restoration. David helped me a great deal, but I also, read and studied all the pertinent and relevant textbooks. I'm a pretty good fictitious art restorer now. I don't make too many mistakes on the page. You should never allow me to have a paintbrush or let me anywhere near a painting that needs restoration, but I can do it on the page pretty well.
One of the other things about Gabriel's backstory, which turned up in as the subject of one of the books, is his relationship with his mother.
Yeah.
And I think that it's Gabriel's personal relationships, which are in such contrast to his job as an assassin, that give the books a sense of irony or a kind of push-pull that you feel when you're reading it.
Right. The book that you're referring to is A Death in Vienna. I think in many respects it will always be my favorite book in the series.
I wondered.
Yeah. And an important part of Gabriel's character is that he is the child of German Holocaust survivors who came to Israel after the war, the formation of the State of Israel. Gabriel's first language at home was German. He still really dreams in German. He should have lived a different life than the life he lives now. He should have been a prominent German Jewish artist living in Berlin, but the great roulette wheel of life didn't allow that to happen. And the fact that he spoke German so well, and the fact that he was so comfortable living in a German skin is why he was recruited to be part of the hit team that went after the perpetrators of the Munich massacre. And like many Holocaust survivors, his mother did not tell him what had happened to her during the war. And the discovery of what happened to her during the war and the punishment of the man that was responsible for it is the story of A Death in Vienna. And as I said, it's probably my favorite of the series.
Do you find that when you're talking about these books or you're being interviewed about these books that the subject inevitably turns political?
Sure.
I think it was A Death in Vienna that I was talking about on the radio and just saying how much I loved it. And I got an email from a woman afterwards who said, how can you like these books? They're so anti-Palestinian.
But they're not.
Okay, talk about that, because I didn't quite know how to answer her.
Well, perhaps you should have read the first book, The Kill Artist, and a book called The Prince of Fire, which contain searing portraits of the Palestinian narrative. In fact, the first book, I received a tremendous amount of emails saying that I had been too sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and too anti-Israeli, if you can believe that. So I just think it's incorrect. And I think that where the stories have dealt with the Palestinian issue, which is really two books, they've been extremely balanced, extremely nuanced, and have portrayed the struggle for a Palestinian homeland as legitimate, and have portrayed the Palestinian plight and suffering in a very sympathetic light. And I just think that it's wrong. And I think that people that Israel is a Rorschach test for many people, and they just see it through their lens. You're never going to convince anyone who's committed to one side or the other to moderate their views, and it's one of the reasons why I was reluctant to make Gabriel into a series character. I knew it going in, and it's just something that I deal with book to book. But that said, I think one of the things that I underestimated when I started writing the series is that how profoundly pro-Israel and supportive of Israel the American public are. This country has a very special relationship with the state of Israel. It's one of the things that I think that critics of American foreign policy in Europe and in the Middle East don't understand, that our support of Israel is rooted in the bond between the American people and the state of Israel, and that it is reflective of how the American people really feel about the state of Israel.
And do you think that's because Israel is the one democracy so far in the Middle East?
I mean, perhaps. It goes back. Certainly, there are religious aspects to it. That the support of Israel among evangelical Christians is quite strong in America right now. Obviously, Israel is not loved in certain quarters of American academia elsewhere, but you know, the bond is strong, I think, and getting stronger. And Israel is going to face some very difficult challenges in the days and months to come as this Middle East goes through this terrible turmoil that we're seeing right now.
Right.
You know, Syria is probably pulling apart as we conduct this interview. We could see a situation in the very near future where the Syria that we once knew is no more. That it might fragment. I think we already see aspects of ethnic cleansing and separation that's taking place in Syria. It could spill over into Lebanon. It could spill over into Jordan. It could reignite a civil war in Iraq. Egypt is in political turmoil at the moment. We don't know who's going to prevail in this struggle, the Muslim Brotherhood or the military. The Middle East has always been a dangerous neighborhood, and it is extremely unstable and dangerous right now.
Mm-hmm. Does Gabriel have any? Does he allow himself second thoughts or reflectiveness about his job as an assassin?
Of course, and I think that I explored that very seriously in the first book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because one of the problems with targeted killing or assassination. Let's also be clear about one thing. The United States is engaged in the exact same thing, to a far greater extent, actually, that the Israelis, and that is trying to decapitate terrorist organizations. It often has the effect of bringing more radical elements to power when you take off the head of the organization. And so there's inevitably blowback, is the word in the intelligence world. So when you engage in these kinds of things, and let's face it, it's very difficult for the people who carry it out. I try to imagine, I try to put myself in the shoes of my characters when they're doing these things, and I simply can't imagine the first assassination that Gabriel carried out in a hotel lobby, an apartment lobby in Rome. Standing there and shooting someone like that. It's very painful to imagine, very difficult.
And do you think that it seems to me that the art that is in such stark contrast to Gabriel's business life or political life, that the art has allowed him to continue his work as an assassin? I mean, because it provides this.
I don't know if allowed. I don't know if I would take it to that extent. Look, the allegory is clear that Gabriel not only heals the paintings that he's working on, but he also heals himself in the process. Right. And as I said, I cannot, as hard as I try, I can't quite imagine what goes through the mind of a terrorist when he slaughters innocent victims, and I also can't imagine what it's really like for these secret soldiers to go out and do the work that they do on behalf of their countries. And so I had to create for myself an arena in which to try to imagine what it's like to overcome these demons and to repair the damage that's done.
And Gabriel has suffered great personal loss as a result of his.
He has. And one thing to keep in mind, that because Israel is so small, that almost everyone has suffered great personal loss. That almost everyone comes from a bereaved family, that they've lost people in war, to terrorism. The Second Intifada, I don't think people realize how devastating it was for the state of Israel, that Israel during that period was quite literally dying of terrorism. You couldn't ride a bus, you couldn't feel safe in a cafe. You would lay in bed at night in Jerusalem and hear the boom. And so, yes, he has suffered because of his work, but so have lots of other Israelis, just because the fact that they live in that country and have lived through this period of political strife.
So that's interesting that his suffering doesn't make him unique.
Not at all. I mean, look, he's a somewhat larger than life character.
Right.
He's given a lot to his country.
Right.
He's lost. He's lost a child.
Right.
He's lost a wife.
Right.
But so have lots of other Israelis. And so have many of my dear friends. And so when I write about him, I always have to keep in the back of my mind that, this friend lost this person. My dear, dear friend lost her sister to a bus bombing. It's just part of life. part of the everyday Israeli story.
Two of the books about Israel that I think that are of my favorite books because they give me so much to think about. One was Amos Oz's In the Land of Israel, his early little bit of a memoir at the beginning of the Peace Now, when Peace Now was starting. And oh gosh, the columnist for the New York Times, From Beirut to Jerusalem, I thought were two good
Tom
ones.
Friedman.
Tom Friedman, thank you. So are there others that you would do you do any research, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I read tons of books. I think that Connor Cruz O'Brien's masterwork, The Siege, is a wonderful book, and it really explains the plight of the Jews in Europe, the early Zionist movement, the desire to have a homeland. Benny Morris's books are great. I've read. I could go on all day.
Yeah.
I own and have read over and over again all of the great tomes of Israeli history.
Are there, when you start out with a book like The Fallen Angel, your newest book, have you plotted it out in your mind?
I have, when I actually begin to start writing.
Or what's your lead up? Talk about
settle on a
process
concept for the book. Decide on the main components of the book. Do my initial research into those components, and then get to work as quickly as possible. I would say that I know a broad arc of the story. I know the first handful of scenes of the story. I would love to have the time, 6 months or so, to do a detailed outline of a novel before I start, but I simply don't have the time. Modern publishing is such that commercial authors really must publish a book a year. For me, that means that I have about 6 months from starting gun to finish line. 6 months to do everything I need to do to get a novel ready for publication. That's not a lot of time. And so I get going as quickly as possible. And I research along the way. I do enough research to get going, and then I'm doing supplemental research as the writing continues. Yep.
And so, had you decided on the particular Caravaggio
painting? Yeah, I decided,
early?
and in fact, it was referenced at the end of last year's book, Portrait of a Spy, that Gabriel was going to be going to the Vatican to restore something really big. And so I put a little hint of that in last year's book, which is something I've never done before, but I wanted to point the story in the next direction.
So these were never filmed?
Not yet.
Not yet. Do you think, are there plans? You can't talk about that?
I can't.
Okay.
I would love to.
Okay, that's fine.
Wheels are in motion.
Okay. Things are happening.
Things are happening.
Your people are talking to their people. But who would you want to? Can you talk about who? Can you speculate who you would want to play? I mean, because Jack Reacher, the Lee Child novels are one of them is just now being filmed, and there was all of this hullabaloo about who's to play Jack Reacher, and then it turns out that it's Tom Cruise, who in many people's mind is not Jack Reacher at all. Mm-hmm. Do you have a feeling about who you would?
Let me say one thing first, and
yes.
that I don't cast anyone in
your head.
No.
Okay.
To me, Gabriel looks and acts the way Gabriel looks and acts, and so any actor for me is going to seem odd. That said, there are a number of really talented actors who would love to do the role, and I would be honored to have any one of them assume Gabriel's tragic but interesting life and take it to the screen.
Okay, fair enough. Because I was trying to think of who I would cast, and people must say
people say it
all
the
time who they would like to.
Clive Owen,
right, right.
Daniel Day-Lewis. I hear all kinds of suggestions.
Right. And who do you read you don't have a lot of time to read for
I do
fun,
not have a lot of time to
but
read.
do you read other international espionage? Do you read the John le Carre, Charles McCary?
I was reared on that kind of stuff. Those are, part of my package of influence, but I have so little time to read that, when I do get a chance to read fiction, I generally pick up something classic and great. When I had a few days off after finishing this book and before starting the promotion tour, I reread The Sun Also Rises. I tend to read good stuff when I do get a chance to read them. And that said, I love commercial fiction. I've read a ton of commercial fiction when I was a kid. I used to sneak into my parents' room and take my mom's Sidney Sheldon and Harold Robbins books when I was a kid. And so when I retire, the first thing I'm going to do is buy a big stack of paperback novels and sit on the beach and read them. But right now I just don't have a lot of time to read.
Well, since Gabriel can't seem to escape Shamron's fatherly embrace, as it were.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. Do you have plans to effect that escape?
I've written 12 books about a man who was supposed to appear in one book. At some point, I'm going to write other books.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly when that is, but at some point, I want to, would like to, and plan to write other books.
The first book was, I'm assuming, was both a great pleasure to write and a lot of fun.
Without question, and that's something, young writers always ask me, for advice. And what I always say is, enjoy the process of writing that first novel.
Right.
Enjoy it. Don't worry about anything. Have fun. Because once you sign that first contract, and once you accept this life as a job, and I hate to even say that because it's not quite a real job, but once you do, it changes.
Yes.
And there are pressures in producing the book, on time and getting it ready for publication, on the schedule that I'm asked to. And I think that, late in my career, I'm looking forward to maybe slowing down a little bit. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I'm only 51 right now. Excuse me, I can't even joke when I say
in the prime of life.
And so I've got a few years left. I would like to
Right.
to keep writing at this pace.
And I guess I have one last question, which is, do you think that you'd be interested ever in writing nonfiction?
No.
No. So
No.
you'd always approach.
No, and it's so interesting that you asked that because I'm asked that question all the time. And no, I think that I did that before. So it's a journal. It's not nonfiction books, obviously,
Right.
but I like fiction.
Well, we're glad you do.
Thank you.
Daniel Silva, thank you so much for doing the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was a real honor to be here.
Oh, thank you.